Why does this exist? It seems obvious. You use a fork to eat, but for most of human history, people didn't. In fact, when this thing first appeared in Europe, it wasn't just rejected, it was feared. Religious leaders called it sinful. A princess who used one was condemned, and when she died of disease, people claimed God punished her for using a fork. Meanwhile, the rest of the world has been using versions of forks for thousands of years. So how did Europe, a continent that loves to call itself cultured, become the slowest, most stubborn place on earth to accept a tiny piece of metal with prongs? This isn't just a story about a utensil. It's about fear of change, class power, religion, and the absurd human instinct to turn everyday objects into moral battles. Because the fork didn't just change how we eat, it changed how we judge people. But before we ask why the fork was hated, we need to understand the world before the fork. Forks have been around for a long time. Ancient Persia, China, and Egypt all used forks in temples and kitchens. But they weren't for eating. They were tools, for carving, for cooking, for hauling chunks of meat out of boiling cauldrons. Eating with them was unthinkable. Hands weren't gross. Hands were considered a proper, natural, even spiritual way to eat. Early European dining looked like this. Use your hands, tear bread to scoop things, use a personal knife, and maybe use a spoon for soups and porridges. Touching food was normal, it was expected. If you didn't use your hands, people thought you were the weird one. So when the fork appears, it threatens tradition. In the 11th century, a princess from the Byzantine Empire arrives in Venice for her wedding. She comes from a world of silk, gold, elaborate etiquette, and a dining habit Europe has never seen. At the wedding banquet, surrounded by powerful nobles and church leaders, she sits at a long table overflowing with food. Everyone around her reaches for shared platters with their hands, the normal, proper, God-approved way to eat. But not her. Instead, she takes out a tiny golden fork. She refuses to touch food with her fingers. A servant cuts it into perfect bite-sized pieces, and she lifts each one to her mouth with this delicate, unfamiliar tool. The reaction is instant. There's silence, then whispers, then disgust and shock. To the Venetian court, this isn't elegance, it's arrogance. Priests condemn her publicly. They say God gave us natural forks, our fingers. They accuse her of vanity, of rejecting the natural order. Later, when she dies young, a religious leader claims God punished her for using a fork. The message is clear: forks equal arrogance, hands equal morality. The fork becomes a symbol of corruption and decadence. To understand the hatred, you need to understand dining culture in medieval Europe. Most meals were eaten from shared dishes. Everyone reached into the same bowl. Etiquette books taught which fingers were acceptable to use. Dining wasn't about cleanliness, it was about virtue and self-control. The fork changed that. It put distance between you and your food. It disrupted the ritual of eating. And worse, it came from the East. To those ancient Europeans, it was foreign, and that scared them. Using a fork wasn't just strange, it was unmanly, unholy, un-European. Eventually, Italians discovered something that changed everything: pasta. Try eating long, saucy noodles with your fingers and maintain dignity. You can't. Two-pronged forks become practical, then fashionable, then necessary. By the 1300s, wealthy Italians are using forks regularly. By the 1500s, the fork is a symbol of sophistication. Elite Italians even carry personal cutlery sets when visiting friends. Your own fork in a little case, because the host might not have one. Slowly, fork-using Italians began influencing Europe, except in one place. A 14-year-old Italian girl marries into the French royal family. Her name, Catherine de' Medici, and she brings her entourage, her chefs, and her forks. At the French court, nobles copy her. Suddenly, forks are glamorous, elegant, sexy even. And then, forks cross the channel to England, and England says absolutely not. An English traveller comes home from Italy bragging about using a fork. People mock him relentlessly. They call him Furcifer, Forkman. Plays and poems ridicule fork users as pretentious snobs. Real men, the English say, eat with their hands. Even into the 1600s, English elites are still sharing soup bowls and wiping their hands on the tablecloth. The fork isn't resisted because it's impractical. It's resisted because it challenges tradition. By the 1700s, factories began producing forks cheaply. Suddenly, normal households can afford them. And once forks become common, knife makers freak out. Knives lose sharp points. The fork now does the spearing. So knives get rounded, polite and socially acceptable. Then things get ridiculous. Victorian elites invent a fork for everything. Salad fork, fish fork, oyster fork, dessert fork, snail fork. If you used the wrong fork, you revealed your class. Forks became a status filter, a silent test saying, do you belong here? The fork isn't just a utensil. It follows a pattern that never went away. Humans resist change. We resist it when it's new. We shame the people who try it first. And once we finally accept it, we rewrite history so it looks inevitable. People literally believed God didn't want us to use it. Now you get one in a plastic wrapper with napkins when you order takeaway. Europe once believed eating food with fingers was holy, and that the fork was dangerous. Progress is weird. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.